Welcome to the SkillWork Forum, where we focus on industry issues, emerging trends, and challenges that surround the skilled trades. I'm Brett Elliott. I'm co-founder and CEO at SkillWork, and I'm usually joined by my business partner, Tim, but today we're switching it up a little bit, and so today I'm joined by Ms. Ashley Toyd, who's one of our client managers at SkillWork, and then our VP of Sales, Mike Matlock. So we recently, just a few weeks ago, we just got back from the large trade show called IPPE, which is the International Production and Process Expo. It's considered to be the world's largest poultry and feed show down in Atlanta. So we wanted to take the opportunity. All three of us were there, along with some more of our team. And so we wanted to take the opportunity on this podcast to just kind of recap some of what we were hearing in just the manufacturing, the skilled trade space. So I asked Mike and Ashley to join me today, and so we're going to do that. So Mike, I'm going to kick it over to you. You know, there was a few different, just kind of repeating topics that we heard. One of them, you know, which we hear often is kind of this situation that happens because a lot of these manufacturing facilities are rural. So they're not, you know, for obvious reasons, you know, to most of us, you know, they're not stuck right in the middle of a city. And so that creates, you know, its own issues in itself as time has gone on. So what were we hearing a little bit on that, Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. First, I appreciate the opportunity to go to the show. I think it's a good opportunity for us to get outside of our work bubble, not only for SkillWork, but these manufacturers, and kind of seeing what the industry is at large. You see, we're just a small part of this big machine. And just talking to a lot of the attendees was kind of the same feeling, whether they were a manufacturer, a distributor, or a customer. But yeah, to your point, it was interesting from the rural aspect because, you know, it is a high presence of poultry manufacturers there. And to your point, there's not a lot of poultry manufacturing plants in downtown Houston or Chicago or LA or anything like that. So it is a pretty significant rural presence. But again, whether you're talking poultry, beef, pork, a lot of those are in rural communities. And I had a few interactions with some folks, which, you know, it's nothing new to us, but it's always a good reminder of what we do and why we do it. Talking to a gentleman specifically from just outside of Nashville, very large city, obviously, but just far enough out that it's considered a rural community. And, you know, they make a beeline to you, and you know, the struggles they're having. And he said, you know, I need help. And so I, you know, go back to the usual question of, well, are you looking for workers or are you looking for skills? And he says, the problem facing rural communities, his specifically, he goes, we have workers, mainly, you know, his farmers. He goes, most of our folks come off the farm, which unlike a lot of the urban settings, it's high retention, great work ethic. They show up, great mechanical aptitude, but they just don't have the basic skills to compete in an ever-changing technology world. You know, every year we see new this, new that, you know, manufacturing 4.0. It's just things moving at a rapid pace, he says, and we just can't find the skill sets to have those folks. Now, I was at a facility earlier this week that we met at the show, and this is outside of Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta, you know, top 7, you know, city in America. And it's a couple hours outside of Atlanta and in a town of 4,500. And talking to the gentleman there, and he says, we just can't find the skilled workers to do that, to do the jobs we need to keep running. And if you think about it, it's a city of 4,500, but there's 7 manufacturing facilities in that location. I don't know how they're supposed to compete and how they're going to find the skills. And therein drives the conversation we have with them, which is going back to the IPPE show, when most of those folks come up to us are coming from rural communities. Almost, if you think of the numbers, and I did a little research on this, 48% of all manufacturing jobs are in rural communities. If almost half of the manufacturing jobs we have in rural communities, where are they going to find the workers? Where are they going to find the talent? And that's the frustration. And they come up and they expect to have that conversation with you. But I think it's an aha moment for them when they start to unpack it and they go, we're not going to get the skills we need. So it's a challenge, which, you know, we've talked about this several times, that therein lies the problem we have as an industry. So that's something we have to address.
Yeah, no, I think it's, we know it, we live in it every day, you know, kind of thing. And, you know, you guys know, some of the audience knows that listens to our show. I've spent 30 years in that manufacturing space. We had 8 manufacturing plants and 100% of them were rural. You know, that kind of started because back in prior, you know, most of these plants some of them are being built, they're newer plants and they're still building them rural for a variety of different reasons. But a lot of them were built there because there was population there and the people would come, like you said, the work was great. What wasn't anticipated 25, 30 years ago, 40 years ago when they did that, or when we all did that as an industry, was the level of automation that was going to come into these facilities. And unfortunately, the number of people who are going to leave those rural settings, to go into the urban areas and those kinds of things. So you kind of a double whammy, so to speak, where you need more and more high-level automation. Those folks are not there. And so obviously, we're not doing a commercial here today, but that's why our model of augmenting maintenance teams, bringing the talent to where you need it, is so fits in with this rural. So we're going to jump from rural to international. And so Ashley was with us. We consider her our top ace for trade shows, and that she hasn't ever met anybody that she didn't want to talk to. And so Ashley, we heard you talked to several people kind of in this vein of international companies with facilities here in the U.S. or thinking about it or this or that. So kind of weigh into a little bit of what we heard down there at IPPE on that.
Sure. Thanks for having me here today. I do enjoy these trade shows. I found this one in particular really spot on with the folks that were walking around, even the international folks that had plants. I was a little surprised at how many did have plants in the United States. And one in particular, they were out of Canada. They have one plant currently in a southeastern state. And they said, please call our plant manager. Here's his name. We need employees that know electrical skills right now. Like, we cannot continue running without them. And so I found that really interesting. I have been at other trade shows and talked to other companies that were international and had plants in the US, that their strategy they were using, their solution was to bring people from that country to the US. They were paying for work visas, are paying for work visas. They're paying for housing. They're paying, for these people to be here for up to a year or more. And that may be building a new plant. That may be just new installs. But this particular plant is on the flip side of that. And they were saying, we might have to shut down our plant in the US. We don't have any talent agency that we can count on to get us that work. We are always in Canada. And our plant manager is underwater, and we don't have a solution at that particular plant. So I think that that's always really rewarding about these shows, is there is still such a problem with finding the talent that you need specific to that plant at that time, but also getting folks that are willing to move to that area of the United States. I, for one, think that internationally, that could be really, really challenging if you're trying to run a business from Germany and you really wish that you could teach some American folks how to work on your equipment so you're not constantly flying somebody over for a big plant.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're right. I think the dynamic changed even more so, during the pandemic, because of the supply. So it was not unusual. We all experienced it. They made the product somewhere else and then they shipped it here. And when that became an issue and we couldn't get supplies in here, I think a lot of these international companies have recognized, we're seeing the similar thing happen in the semiconductor industry and whatnot, where now they're saying, okay, to be able to manage the supply, we've got to build the plant here. Well, it works okay to bring a guy from Germany or wherever, they're coming from for the building of the plant and the other, but it's not, or for the startup, but it's not a sustainable model that you're going to bring your talent from over there. So these international companies are now experiencing what the US based companies were already experiencing, which was, we can't find the skills. So we're going to have to figure out, a way to address that. I think it's always interesting because I think, and I'm speaking to myself, and to you guys because we are Americans, but I think sometimes the international companies are quicker to embrace a different solution. We can be a little bit stubborn here as Americans and go, well, this is the way we always did it. And so we're going to figure this out, kind of a thing. And where some of the international companies are probably a little quicker to maybe take an advancement in the way we're going to do that. So I think that's interesting.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It was interesting to that point, Brett, that the questions that we get when we talk to plants in the United States, I did not get any of those questions.
Yeah.
They were almost of the mindset, are you willing to help? Are you willing to call this plant manager in Virginia, please?
Yep.
You know, and it's interesting because they have such a huge struggle within our country finding what our country's already struggling to find.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because they didn't care to dig deeper than just please help.
Yep.
So
along that line, you know, Mike, and this is well documented, they're calling it the manufacturing boom. And so again, coming out of the pandemic and because of supply chain issues, you know, I read an article a while back that says that the investment in manufacturing facilities in the U.S. is going to be not in dollar terms, because obviously there's more dollars today than it would have been in the 50s and 60s, just in sheer number of facilities that are being built, you know, in the U.S. because of these supply things and bringing things back on shore, which is it's a little bit almost mind-boggling to some degree, because we know, because we live in it every day, you can't find the talent now, and it's almost like, well, we're going to build it and we'll figure it out then. Now, there's a semiconductor facility, they may have got it figured out now, that was done and ready. You're talking about a very, very expensive, probably $1 billion facility that they couldn't open because they didn't have the people. You know, I mean, that's that kind of thing. So but still we're hearing, you know, about plant expansions and openings. So what do we hear, Mike?
Oh yeah, that's a great topic. I was having a conversation with a gentleman, and they began construction a few years ago, and they anticipate it being open in the next 2 years, which again, these things don't get built overnight.
Right.
You know, it's a 3 to 5 year, you know, endeavor to build one of these. So, and we were having the conversation, it's like, well, if you build it, they will come. They're not showing up. And yeah, you're right. There's a manufacturing boom in the numbers of, and I read that, you know, coming out of the pandemic, there was a need to invest in new manufacturing facilities and try to get the economy booming again. And there was $84 billion spent in 2022. It's going to be $166 billion this year. That's an additional $80+ billion.
Mm-hmm.
It's double in size.
Wow.
And where are they being built? Again, we're going back to the problem. You go back, most of these in the rural communities. So in talking to these managers and, you know, these plant managers, they're struggling because they think, well, we're going to start building, and in the next 3 to 5 years, either we'll find the help or somehow we'll solve the problem. But they can't anticipate the changes. You know, we always talk about how quickly this is evolving in terms of skill sets and the technology. And they think they can anticipate 3 to 5 years in advance, but they really can't. And so it's a frustration, but I think it's more than that. It's almost a fear. You can sense when you're talking. I remember just talking to this gentleman, he was out of Texas. He goes, we've got to find these folks because this place is going to be open. And then what? So not only get it up and running, but how do you operate it after that? So, you know, we get us out of commercial, but we go in, we help get them set up. You know, we can get the staff on site while they try to find their staff. But even then, they're thinking, where are we going to find a lot of these folks in the rural areas? Because again, if you're in a rural area and you've got 2, 3, 5, 10 manufacturing facilities, you're just kind of shifting the talent around as opposed to, you know, increasing the talent. So yeah, it's good for us. It's good for an economy that we're building all these facilities because we need them. We need to have more domestic builds, but therein is again the problem. How do we manufacture? Now, how do we operate these manufacturing facilities?
Yeah, no, I think it's a big, you know, I've built and started up, you know, a couple of different plants in my manufacturing career, and anybody who has, I mean, it is hard enough to install a new line in a plant. You could have one next to it that looks exactly like that one, and still the uptime to get that line up and get it efficient is, anybody who's listening who's spent any time in that, they're all shaking their head right now because it's unbelievable how difficult it is to get that up, and the amount of money. It's always, you end up spending way more than you thought you were going to in downtime and inefficiency. If you think about that, you apply that to an entire facility, an entire plant, you know, type of thing. And, you know, we talk to companies, and we've gotten to help some companies, you know, that to your point, Mike, where if you don't have a plan on how you're going to address the talent, you're going to basically settle for a lot less talent than what you want, with the hope that you'll eventually get there. But the cost of that, so, you know, obviously in what we do, and there's some other companies that may do similar things to what we do, but the ability to bring in an augmented maintenance staff. And then as we say in those companies, a lot of times it's just at least until you can get up and go, which is usually, a year down the road. But the amount of cost that goes in, we opened up the plant in Nebraska, and, the numbers that they were talking about, what they were going to be, this was a poultry plant, what they were going to be processing within X amount of months, I listened to them and I thought, sounds really good on paper, and I don't think they're to those numbers yet. And they've been open probably 3 years. Right. And so it's a challenge. It's a real process and a challenge, which is what we're hearing in those. And like you said, we're spending the money, which is great, that we're all this opportunity, but consistently, we don't know where we're going to find the talent. And so.
No, and I think, similar to that, we see the expansion, but there's also contraction. There are shutdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So for every plant being built, and I don't know the numbers, but how many are shutting down? And again, talking to an individual, they're shutting down. And as we're in facilities, household names, in America that are in shutdown. And if you're competing for the talent and you're in a smaller community, even if you're in a larger community, and you announce you're doing a shutdown, where does your talent go?
Mm-hmm.
They know they're on the clock, whether it's 6 months, 9 months to 18 months, and they start to leave. So again, I was talking to an individual and he asked me the question. He says, do you help with shutdowns? Because our people started leaving. And we've seen this. A few facilities here in Nebraska we worked with where they'd lost almost their entire workforce across the street because they're shutting down. And something new also I had considered, and again, it was a customer I saw this week from the show. It was a transition. So to me, there's 3 categories. You have the opens, the close, and the transition. And I pulled up to the building and it wasn't their building. Then I realized there was a temporary sign out front. So they took over a larger, 5-state, facility, bought this smaller one, and talking to them, and they go, well, once we took over, people said, well, I don't know you, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
So it's ever changing. And that's what I like about this. There's not a boring day. You learn something new every day. So,
yeah.
Well, I also think though that, something that came up a lot at the show, like other shows this year that we've been to, is the rural community, the new construction or the shutdown. You are dealing with a small community. You do not have access to talent outside of that because your HR and talent and acquisitions, you don't have the resources to pour into that. And they are already busy doing so many other things. But those towns, from what I hear, and I just know growing up in small town Iowa, where we have manufacturing plants, Brett had one there and we still are in that facility helping. But you have the same group of farm kids that become mechanics because they worked in the barn or the shop. And that's great. And that's mechanical and that is critical. And I don't foresee that no matter how automated we get, even with AI, you're still going to have mechanical repairs that need it. So I think they will always be critical. But that one mechanic can go to 10 different plants. And pretty soon, mid to lower $20 mechanic is making mid-30s. And now that's the new benchmark. And that's the new hourly wage that these rural plants that are hurting so bad have to pay. And I think that one thing I was pleasantly surprised to be able to share with these plants is, without sounding gimmicky, you don't have to be paying that. You don't have to, because when you do a nationwide talent search, you think it's going to be so expensive, and it's not. They don't know you are there and you don't know that they're there.
Yep.
And that is really what I feel like we do, is I think that we allow these manufacturing teams to get into this national talent search. Instead of it being for the CEO level or executive level, they get to actually pick their electromech, or they actually pick their automation and controls technician. And it doesn't always work culturally or personality of a team. And sometimes the fit isn't exact, but I would say 8 to 9 out of 10 times we do get the skills.
Are you a maintenance technician looking for your next work opportunity? SkillWork is the premier travel staffing agency focused exclusively on finding jobs for skilled labor talent like you. Our employment model combines work plus freedom, helping you find jobs you love in facilities that are spread across the country. Our travel contracts include competitive pay and even allowances for housing and per diem. Skillwork exists to connect skilled workers with companies that need them. And our philosophy and how we run our business is simple: to honor God in all we do, bring respect back to the skilled trades, and positively impact those around us. For more information on how to work for Skillwork, visit skillwork.com or call us at 402-447-7058. Call us today. We'd love to work with you.
So kind of along the line of the plant expansion and the openings, I think the other thing, I'm going to let both of you kind of speak into this, but I thought it was interesting. I'm not sure that I've seen this at all the shows that we go to, but it just seemed like there was a larger presence of these local chambers, these chambers of commerce that were, and obviously they're all trying, which is kind of an interesting dynamic because we're talking about the rural and you can't find the people and all these other things, but yet these communities, they're trying to get industry to continue to build in those towns. And there just seemed to be a little bit more of a presence there. And I think they're possibly, they're trying to provide solutions back to those companies. So, I know we talked to a couple, of folks there.
Yeah. I didn't expect to see that. That's not something I anticipated. And there were two individuals specifically that I had this conversation with where they come up and you look at the badge and you're thinking, what do we want to talk about? Because I know nothing about the chamber of this small town America. But they start asking the questions. And then you realize there's a shift. We've always thought about how we're working with the companies and the facilities and how can we help them. And one of the gentlemen, small town Nebraska, said, if you come to my town, I'm going to take you and introduce you to these facilities. And I said, okay, if you're looking for a referral fee, how does this work? And he made the point, he says, we have to keep them operating. And then you realize how dependent these small communities are on these facilities. It's not just the company and their bottom line and operating, but these small towns can be, decimated if one of these facilities decides, hey, we just can't operate the way we want to, so we're going to shut down and go elsewhere. So it's one of those things that you can kind of see their face, instead of what can you do for us? It's like, can you please come help us?
Yeah.
That was interesting. It's not something I anticipated.
Yeah.
A kind of a sense of urgency on our, at least on my part.
Yeah. No, I think it was interesting too. So Ashley, I don't know if you talked to any of the folks from the chambers there, but I know you saw the same kind of thing going on.
I did not actually, but when Mike and I believe maybe Scott had spoken with someone as well at the IPPE show, I'm always like super ideation minded, and it does make you take it to that micro level of community where it's not just about that plant. It's not just about that brand. It is genuinely about an entire community. And I'm from small town Iowa. When you were just saying that, Mike, I was thinking, if 4 plants went away, I can almost not think of a family that I know, and I know a lot of families, that it wouldn't negatively affect and impact. And I don't know where they would go. And those are people that have lived there, and that's all they ever want to do is live there. And it is dependent on those plants making it.
That's a great point, Ashley. I'm very familiar with the community, where you grew up, in those facilities, because we had a plant there. And like you said earlier, we do some work with that one now. But if you think about that, right, if any one of those facilities, especially, the one that's the largest there, if they got to a point where they said, and we know that facility in particular is at least 20 short in maintenance technicians right now. And on the surface, you go, okay, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is, if you really want to kind of personalize it, if at some point they can't keep that plant running efficiently, and the corporate company who isn't from that small town says, we just can't do it, we got to go. It's devastating, so I think that's, we talk about, one of our core values is to measure success by the number of people we positively impact. And it's everything from the skill worker to the client, but also to the community. And it really connects when you think about, if we can help a facility get started or stay, that has a big impact, on that community. So
I think, real quick, I think at least for me, we tend to lose sight of just how fragile a lot of these supply chains are. As you know, I was in a facility,
true.
Earlier this year, and this is a large name household brand that every one of us has. I guarantee it. And you go in there and you just see the struggles we're having. And you think, well, surely with your brand name, you're going to find some skills. It's a smaller community, but you're outside of a bigger community. Surely you can find it. And literally when the HR manager follows you to your car and says, can you please help us? Because if you don't, if you can't get us this many, we may have to shut down, and they will outsource us elsewhere. And you're thinking to yourself, a handful of people are going to make a difference to this large brand name in America. And it really is that fragile. So yeah,
and I think a handful of the right people may only really be 3 of the right people that are needed. And that's something else that you don't think about until these conversations are had. But having the right talent versus having a full staff is I think that's the biggest issue on the table, is finding it, but finding the right talent. And that comes out of 3 shows. I would say that was a part of every conversation I had, especially this show.
No, I think it's a good call. Back, I'm reminded, when I was working through, 5.5 years ago, the decision, to start Skill Work, the problem was obvious. The question was, could we create a model that could truly have an impact and address some of the things that we're talking about? And now 5.5 years in, a lot of the people that we've gotten to talk to and help. But I remember it cost me a steak dinner, but I was meeting with a maintenance manager, a gentleman that I knew, and I was asking him, some of these questions, was, can you find the staff, that kind of thing. He said, you don't understand. He said, I've got 20 maintenance people, of which about 7 of them can do what I need them to do. I don't need 20. I need about 14 or 15, but I can't find the talent. And so we're just throwing, I hate to use the word because it sounds a little, dehumanizing, but we're just kind of throwing bodies at the problem with the idea that somehow it's going to fix itself. So I think your point of, it's not just we say sometimes, if you had 3 of the right people, you could probably maybe let go 6 of the wrong people, or give them an opportunity to go back and advance their skills or something. So any closing thoughts from you guys?
I think that the thing that helped me in my career at Skill Work is when I got here, I knew nothing about the industry, and I was naive. And when I would get asked the question, can you find them? Of course we can find them. I mean, I can see them. I have all these resumes.
Right.
I wasn't aware of who they were and where they came from. And they all were at the plant champ somewhere, and they weren't just bored.
Nope.
I mean, by and large, they're like, we're looking for work. Where I was, is no longer there. There was a change, and the plant champ has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So I love that.
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
Any final thoughts?
I would say to anybody that's watching and has contemplated going to a show like this, especially in your common production and packaging processes and products, this was an excellent show. You do not have to be a meat supplier, producer, processor, but it was a very down-to-earth show where I felt like the right conversations were happening with the right people. Mm-hmm. And if you're thinking about going, I know that we're probably planning to be there next year. Mm-hmm. And I would encourage anybody. They even have a marching band that comes through today on
did
stilts.
Have a marching band.
So that was really cool. It's always nice to have entertainment there.
They got to keep us entertained.
Yeah.
So.
But I really enjoyed it. It's really fun, and it's a great place to network. I don't think you could have a better network, because no matter how automated we get and how virtual we get, I think there's nothing better than having a conversation and looking in someone's eyes and shaking their hand. So
yeah, well said. You can probably go to our website and see kind of where we're going to be next. I don't know when this podcast will drop. I know our next show is about a month out, Pack Expo East in Philadelphia, March 18th, 20th. You may be listening to this after that. And if so, don't come to Philly. We won't be there after that. But we have, a variety of other trade shows. We'd love to get the chance to meet you at one of them. But really just thank you for tuning in today to the Skill Work Forum. We hope this discussion has made a positive impact in some part of your life. And remember, Skillwork exists to connect skilled workers with great companies. And so if you are in that, and then if you think there's just want to explore if there's a way we can help you, definitely reach out to us. You can always connect with us at our website at skillwork.com. Until next time, God bless and thanks for joining.